We need younger talent willing to work for half your salary, he said bluntly from across his glass desk. You're just too costly for where we're headed. My name is Sean Whitaker, 50 years old, Senior Client Relations Executive at Trivana Corp in Phoenix, Arizona. I spent 15 years developing their client base from the ground up, and it all ended with an 8-minute discussion on a Tuesday morning. I had sensed it coming for months. Ever since Troy Ellison assumed the role of regional director, there had been murmurs, restructuring, modernization, budget cuts, all the typical corporate jargon that signals experienced professionals are about to be pushed out. Troy was 34, dressed in custom-tailored suits that cost more than my first car, and constantly spoke of disruption, as if it were something on a coffee shop menu. During meetings, he'd glance at me, not with contempt, just impatience, like I was a landline phone in a room full of smartphones, still functional, but outdated. The market's evolving, he went on, barely glancing up from my personnel folder. We need individuals fluent in digital culture, social media engagement. You know how it is. I didn't know. I just didn't agree. I had built trusted partnerships with our top clients through thousands of phone calls, hundreds of face-to-face meetings, and 15 years of resolving issues algorithms couldn't begin to comprehend. When James from High Manufacturing faced production setbacks that nearly bankrupted him, I restructured his entire payment plan over a single weekend. When Catherine from Westridge Holdings lost her husband, I hand-delivered her contract renewal so she wouldn't have to worry about work on top of grief. But Troy wasn't interested in any of that. He was focused on my salary and envisioning a replacement in their 20s at half the cost. I completely understand, I said, shaking his hand. He seemed relieved by my composure, even thanked me for my professionalism. As I packed up my office that afternoon, Lisa from accounting, who'd been around almost as long as I had, stopped by. You doing okay? She asked gently from the doorway. I'm fine, I replied and meant it. They don't know what they're doing, she whispered, glancing down the corridor. Troy's convinced the board he's some kind of visionary. I just nodded and kept boxing up my things. What neither of them realized was that I wasn't angry. I was already thinking several moves ahead. Because while Troy stared at spreadsheets, I remembered phone numbers, commitments, and 15 years of clients who didn't call Trivana Corp. They called me. I had joined Trivana back when it was still Western Business Solutions. 3 employees, a windowless office, more ambition than actual customers. Harold Thompson ran the company then, a former sales guy who believed business was built on relationships, not transactions. People sign contracts with people, he'd always say, not with companies. Don't forget that. I never did. For 15 years, I lived by those words. I was always the first person clients contacted when things went wrong and the last voice they heard before renewing a deal. My cell phone held more direct lines than the company's directory. That commitment came at a personal cost. My marriage fell apart 8 years ago. Nancy and I divorced, partly because I put Trivana's success above our own. My daughter, Jessica, now 23, spent her teen years seeing me mostly on weekends and holidays. These days, she understands. She was actually the first person I called after the meeting with Troy. They did what? She said, immediately furious. It's just business, I said, driving home with my office in a single cardboard box. The new director wants his own team. After everything you've done for them? That's awful, Dad. She wasn't wrong. But I didn't care about being right. I cared about what came next. The signs had been there for a while. Harold had retired the previous year, selling most of his shares to investors who promised to preserve the company's culture. 6 months later, Troy showed up, armed with PowerPoints and MBA lingo. Suddenly, our quarterly meetings were filled with talk of market penetration and customer acquisition costs. No one mentioned relationships anymore. 3 weeks ago, I walked past the conference room and overheard Troy speaking with someone in HR. The compensation of legacy staff is misaligned with current industry standards, he was saying, especially in client relations. Legacy staff. That's what I was now, a relic. I went back to my office and pulled up my personal contact list, not the company CRM. My own records, names, numbers, 15 years of handwritten notes, kids' graduations, favorite restaurants, vacation spots, details you couldn't extract from a database. Then I made a call to Daniel Blake, an old colleague who left 5 years earlier to join a rival firm. We'd stayed in touch, meeting for lunch every now and then. How's Lennox and Blake treating you? I asked casually. Growing fast, he said. Actually, we were just talking about adding more people to the client relations team. I remember smiling. That's good to know. So, the day Troy summoned me to his office, I already had an offer letter from Daniel sitting in my inbox. 3 days after being let go, I sat in the parking lot of Crestwick Golf Club, watching Troy arrive for his 2 o'clock tea time. He was meeting James from High Manufacturing, my most loyal client over the last decade. From my car, I could see them shaking hands, Troy all eager enthusiasm, James polite but reserved. That's when it hit me. Troy wasn't just replacing me, he was trying to fill my shoes. He thought client relationships could be handed off like shared files, a handshake here, a meeting there. He had no idea those connections weren't assets. They were trust built over years. I watched them walk toward the first tee, and something clicked. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. I started my car and drove straight to Lennox and Blake's downtown office. Daniel met me in the lobby, looking surprised. I thought you were taking a week to consider our offer, he said. I'm done thinking, I replied, but I want to revise the terms. In the conference room, I laid out my conditions: full authority over client onboarding, the freedom to structure my own team, and, most importantly, no enforcement of a non-compete clause concerning my former clients. Daniel listened closely, then brought in Patricia Lennox herself. You're essentially asking to bring your client roster with you, she said after I'd explained my proposal. I'm not taking anything that doesn't already belong to me, I answered. Those relationships exist because of 15 years of dedication. The contracts might be in Trivana's name, but the trust, they gave that to me. Patricia studied me in silence for a long moment, then nodded. Make it happen, and the terms are yours. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and my phone. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt focused. This wasn't about payback. It was about honoring the work I'd done and the commitments I had kept. Jessica called while I was making my list. How are you really doing, Dad? She asked. I thought about it. Better than I expected, I said. Sometimes you need to get pushed out to realize where you actually belong. So what's next? I'm starting fresh, I said, looking down at the 10 names I had circled. But not from zero. After we ended the call, I opened my laptop and started writing emails, not to the clients, but to their assistants, the real gatekeepers, the people I had always treated with as much respect as the executives they worked for. If you'd be willing to let them know I've taken on a new role, I wrote, I'd be grateful for a chance to share an update personally. No pressure, no peach, just transparency. By midnight, 7 of them had replied, all with the same message. They want to hear from you. I closed my laptop and slept better than I had in months. The next morning marked one of showing Troy exactly what he had thrown away. My first call was to James at High Manufacturing. No assistant this time, straight to his cell. Sean, I was wondering when I'd hear from you, he said, clearly relieved. Had a golf meeting with your replacement yesterday. Spent 4 hours listening to him ramble about synergy, and not once did he ask about my daughter's graduation. That's why I'm calling, I said. I moved to Lennox and Blake. But this isn't a sales pitch, James. If you're satisfied with Trivanta, that's perfectly fine with me. The silence lasted only a moment. Send me the paperwork, he said. We're following you. By the end of the week, I had similar conversations with 6 other clients. No pressure, just clarity. I was somewhere new. They were welcome to join me if they chose to. They all chose to. It was Catherine from Westridge Holdings who gave me the heads up. Your old company called yesterday, she said. Some overly assertive guy named Troy claimed you were in breach of contract, that clients weren't allowed to follow you. I thanked her and immediately got on the phone with Daniel. He looped in Lennox and Blake's legal department, who confirmed what I had already suspected. Troy was bluffing. My old employment agreement had a non-solicitation clause, but nothing that stopped clients from moving voluntarily. As long as you're not actively targeting them, you're fine, the attorney reassured me. The next morning, I walked into my new office and found an email from Troy waiting. Subject line, cease and desist. The content was exactly what you'd expect. Legal threats, accusations of client interference, demands to return all proprietary information. It closed with a vague offer to settle before things escalated further. I printed it and handed it to Daniel. He's unraveling, Daniel said with a smirk. The board must be pushing him hard. He doesn't understand what's going on, I replied. He thinks I took something. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Lisa from Trivana. They're in full panic mode, she whispered. Troy's been locked in board meetings all day. They're talking about client retention bonuses, emergency outreach. He told them you hacked the CRM. I laughed out loud. I've never even logged into the CRM, and you know that. I know, she said. That's why I called. They've hired an outside firm to audit system activity. When they find nothing, they'll have to admit you didn't take a thing. I didn't need to, I said. The clients came on their own. Exactly. But Sean, be careful. Troy's desperate. He promised the board he could slash expenses without losing clients. Now he's lost 7 in a single week. After we hung up, I called Patricia Lennox to update her. She wasn't fazed by the legal noise, but she was impressed by the client conversions. 7 major accounts in 5 days, she said. Without a single pitch deck? I've never seen anything like it. It's not about pitching, I told her. It's about trust. Just as I was packing up for the day, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. This is Troy Ellison. We should talk. In person. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Copper Blues downtown. This doesn't need to get messy, eh? I showed it to Daniel, who immediately advised against going. He's desperate, Daniel warned. Don't give him anything he can twist. But I disagreed. I wanted to hear what he had to say. The next morning, I arrived at Copper Blues 15 minutes early and picked a table in the back with a full view of the entrance. Troy showed up at 9:05, scanning the room until he spotted me. His confident walk didn't quite hide the strain in his shoulders. Thanks for coming, he said, sliding into the booth. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't say anything, just waited. Look, he said, leaning in, what would it take to stop this? The board's on my back. Whatever Lennox is offering, we'll match it, plus a signing bonus. And just like that, I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. I'm not interested in coming back, I said flatly. Troy's corporate smile faded slightly. Then what do you want? A consulting arrangement? Referral fees for the accounts you're taking? I took a slow sip of my coffee. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. Everything's about money, he said with certainty. That's why you're losing. I set the cup down. They're not following me because I gave them better rates or flashier service packages. They're following me because for 15 years, I answered their calls on weekends. I remembered the names of their children. I treated them like people, not just accounts. Troy's expression grew cold. Very touching, but let's be realistic. Name your price to stop targeting our client roster. I haven't targeted anyone. I haven't violated any agreements. I merely informed people where I ended up, and they made their own decisions. He leaned back, studying me. The board isn't pleased. They brought me in to modernize operations, cut expenses, not lose millions in client revenue overnight. And who did they blame when you explained what happened? I asked. His slight flinch told me everything. That's irrelevant. It matters to me, I replied, leaning forward. Because I'm guessing you didn't tell them the whole story. That you let go of the one person responsible for sustaining those relationships without grasping the consequences. That you viewed my salary as an expense instead of an investment. Troy's jaw clenched. They understand that restructuring comes with temporary disruption. Is that what you're calling a 30% loss in revenue within 1 week? Temporary disruption. That struck a nerve. His eyes widened slightly. 30%. It's 7 clients, I clarified. 7 clients who account for nearly 1/3 of Travant's annual billings. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because you were focused on payroll spreadsheets instead of reviewing client value reports. The color drained from his face. That's when I knew he'd been selectively reporting the fallout to the board. How many more are at risk? He asked, his tone lowered. All of them. I answered honestly. Every major client I've managed over the last 15 years has reached out. I haven't even initiated contact yet. He stared at me for a long moment. What happens if I return to the board and tell them you've been actively pursuing our clients? That you took proprietary data? Then you'd be lying, I responded calmly. And your IT audit will confirm that. I didn't take a single document, download a single file, or violate a single confidence. The only thing I took was 15 years worth of personal relationships that I built with my own effort. You can't intimidate me with false claims, Troy. He recoiled slightly, as if I'd slapped him. How did you know about the IT audit? I simply smiled. People talk to those they trust. That's another concept you fail to grasp about this business. Troy's phone buzzed. He glanced down, and something in his expression shifted. Panic quickly hidden. I need to take this, he said, rising quickly. We're not done here. But as I watched him hurry outside to take the call, I knew we were. Whatever was happening at Trevant was spiraling beyond his control. Later that day, Daniel dropped by my office looking slightly confused. You just got a call from Harold Thompson, he said. Isn't he your old boss? The one who retired. Former boss and former owner? Daniel corrected himself. Did he leave a number? Said he'd already have it. Also said, and I'm quoting, the board called an emergency session. They want to speak with you yesterday. I nodded, unsurprised. Thanks. After Daniel left, I leaned back in my chair, considering my next step. Things were falling into place quicker than I had expected. Harold wouldn't have reached out unless something significant was happening. I picked up my phone and dialed his number from memory. They're in full crisis mode, Harold said without a greeting when he answered. Once the board realized exactly which clients had left, they called me to ask what in God's name was going on. I leaned back. And what did you tell them? The truth, that the reason Trevant has had such a consistent client base was because of you, that you were worth every dime they paid you, and then some. I appreciate that, Harold. It's not about appreciation, he said gruffly. It's about 15 years of work getting flushed away by some kid who thinks you can run a business based on algorithms. The board wants to hold an emergency session. They're asking if you consider coming back. I wasn't shocked, but it wasn't what I was after. I'm comfortable at Lennox and Blake now, with 7 of Trevant's top clients, Harold noted dryly. Soon to be 10, I admitted. 3 more are finalizing paperwork this week. A low whistle sounded through the line. No wonder they're freaking out. That's 46% of Trevant's annual income. I finished the thought for him. The line went quiet for a beat. You always did know everyone's numbers better than they did, Harold finally said. So what's your next move, Sean? Because the board is prepared to offer you Troy's role to stop the hemorrhaging. It was tempting for about 3 seconds. Then I remembered Troy's condescending tone, how he'd barely acknowledged me during our last meeting, and how quickly 15 years of dedication had been reduced to a budget line. I'm not interested in his job, I said, but I'm interested in something else. Name it. A partnership deal, Lennox and Blake and Trevant jointly handling client services for accounts that would benefit from both firms' strengths. Harold was silent for a moment, taking it in. You want the board to approve a partnership with the very company that's currently draining their client base. I want them to face reality, I corrected. At the rate this is going, Trevant won't have enough major clients left to stay afloat. But a partnership could stabilize both firms. My clients receive the best of both offerings. Trevant retains partial revenue instead of losing it altogether. And Lennox and Blake expands its market presence without an all-out war. And Troy, that's the board's decision, I said, though we both already knew what they'd decide. I had no interest in his future. My only priority was the clients and the employees who had been caught in the crossfire of his so-called restructuring. Harold chuckled. You always were better at playing the chessboard than anyone ever gave you credit for. I'll bring it to the board first thing tomorrow, 9 o'clock sharp. After ending the call, I summoned Patricia Lennox to my office and outlined the proposal. She listened closely, occasionally jotting down notes. This is remarkably generous, she commented once I'd finished. We could just wait another month and collect the remaining clients when Trevant collapses. We could, I acknowledged. But that would hurt a lot of good people who work there. This way, both firms benefit. The clients receive premium service, and no one loses their job because of one man's lack of foresight. Patricia observed me for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. You really aren't doing this for payback. Revenge is a waste of energy, I said. I'm focused on creating something better. The following morning at 9:45, my phone rang. It was Harold calling straight from the boardroom. They're in, he said succinctly. Full partnership agreement, pending legal clearance. And Troy's been asked to submit his resignation, effective immediately. And the employees? No additional restructuring, he confirmed. The board admitted they were too swept up in Troy's vision of cost-cutting and lost sight of what truly drives this business. I thanked him and ended the call, feeling a surprising sense of relief. It wasn't about triumph. It wasn't about settling a score. It was about correcting what had gone wrong. Patricia appeared in my doorway, eyebrows raised in question. "We have a deal," I told her. "Now we build something stronger than either company could have done alone." She smiled. All because they underestimated the quiet guy who just nodded and walked away. 6 weeks later, I stood at the podium in Lennox and Blake's conference hall, facing a room filled with familiar faces, clients from both firms, board members, and staff. The partnership announcement was becoming official today. Troy, unsurprisingly, was absent. Last I heard, he'd accepted a role at a startup in Tucson, where his obsession with trimming budgets might actually be appropriate. "Today marks the start of something rare in our field," I said, scanning the crowd. "Not a merger, not an acquisition, a genuine partnership, founded on the idea that successful business relationships are built by people, not numbers on a spreadsheet." In the back of the room, I spotted Harold beaming proudly. Standing beside him were Lisa and several other Trevant team members who had feared for their jobs only weeks earlier. The partnership framework was elegantly straightforward. Clients could select which company would serve as their primary provider, while gaining access to specialized services from both. Revenue would be distributed based on service usage. Most crucially, the client relations teams from both organizations would now operate under my leadership. After the formalities, James from High Manufacturing approached me, shaking his head with a grin. "When you left Trevant, I was ready to follow you wherever you went," he said. "But this is even better. You turned getting let go into the best thing that could have happened, for everyone except the guy who let you go." Catherine from Westridge joined us, nodding in agreement. "That young man never understood what he was tossing away," she said. "But we did." As the event wound down, Patricia Lennox found me standing by the windows that overlooked the city. "The board's calling it a masterstroke," she said. "In 6 weeks, you've reinvented 2 companies and secured client loyalty for years to come." I shook my head. I just reminded everyone of what they already knew. Business isn't sustained by cost reductions. It's driven by relationships. "And revenge?" she asked with a slight smile. "Was that a part of it?" "The best revenge wasn't taking the clients," I replied, looking out across Phoenix. "It was showing everyone the right way to keep them." 1 month after the partnership became official, I left the office early to meet Jessica for dinner. She had followed the entire story with a mix of pride and awe. "So technically, you're more influential now than you were before," she said as we settled into our booth at the restaurant. I shrugged. "It's not about influence. It's about doing what's right." "Still," she pressed, "the guy who fired you is out. You've essentially got 2 firms reporting to you now, and every one of your clients thinks you're some sort of business wizard." "I'm just the guy who picks up his phone on the weekends," I said with a grin. After dinner, I drove home to my quiet house, reflecting on the journey of the past several months, from being dismissed without ceremony to reshaping a major slice of Phoenix's corporate scene. It had never been about getting back at Troy. It had been about proving that what I'd spent 15 years building had real, lasting worth. The next morning, I arrived at my office to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a framed photo of the original Western Business Solutions team, just Harold, myself, and 2 others standing proudly outside that tiny first office from 15 years ago. The note attached read simply, "People sign contracts with people. Never forget that. Harold." I placed a frame on my desk where clients could see it when they visited, a reminder of where it had all begun and why it still mattered. Later that day, I had back-to-back meetings with clients from both Trevant and Lennox and Blake. Not crisis talks, not damage control, just the regular relationship-focused conversations that had always been my forte. As I picked up the phone to make the first call, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, genuine satisfaction. Not from winning some corporate showdown, but from the confirmation that doing business the right way, the human way, still counted in the end. Troy had done me a favor when he tried to replace me with someone cheaper. He'd proven just how much I was worth. And that was a lesson worth every step of the journey.